Welcome back to Football Daily, where today we're talking about the Ballon d'Or. That's right, this week the 30 nominees for the 2023 Ballon d'Or were released. Now, the actual ceremony doesn't take place until the end of October, but we have seen those 30 names. There's some interesting selections on there. So today, I'm going to attempt to rank 1 to 30 where I would put the Ballon d'Or. Okay? The least likely to the most likely for me. This is personal preference, who I think should be winning it. Okay? I want to see your 1 to 30s in the comments below. Let's get straight into it. I'm going to flash up my bottom 10 as one group because I want to really focus on my top 20 and I don't want to take up too much of your time. So let's go with number 30, run through these very quickly. Kolo Muani, great season domestically, but Frankfurt finished 7th. Wasn't able to convert in that World Cup final despite making a big impact. I think maybe next year, the year after, now he's at PSG, he will quickly climb this list. 29, I've got Bonu, of course, in there really because of the Europa League win for me. Anyway, I know Morocco had an amazing World Cup as well, but domestically, not that incredible by post-shot expected goals, 36th in La Liga. Barella is at 28 for me because of the Coppa Italia win. You know, a really, really solid season for him in Inter Milan's midfield, Champions League runner-up. Onana at 27, again, Coppa Italia, Champions League runner-up. I've got Gvardiol at 26. You know, he did win the Pokal, so you have to put him up there in terms of third place at the World Cup, maybe the best young defender on the planet alongside William Saliba, but not good enough to crack my top 20. Lautaro Martinez may be unlucky to be this low, actually. Might be unlucky to be this low, given that he did win the Coppa Italia, did win the World Cup, but was kind of dropped after that second group game against Mexico, wasn't he? Favoured Julian Alvarez going forward. Second top scorer in Serie A, 6 assists as well. So maybe Lautaro is a little low at 25. I've gone for Emi Martinez at 24 because of obviously the World Cup heroics, the Golden Glove at the World Cup, the penalty saves at the World Cup, 22 clean sheets last season. Maybe slightly kind to him here, putting him above Lautaro. I'm not going to lie, kind of tempted to swap those two round. I've got Martin Odegaard at 23, last season's, in my opinion, breakthrough creator in world football, PFA Team of the Year, Arsenal captain, 15 goals, 9 assists. But, you know, this isn't always just on awards and statistics. Sometimes this is on a feeling you get around a player. And I just love Martin Odegaard. I think he's just a fabulous footballer. When you watch him, he's just glorious, just glides through games. So he didn't make my top 20, but what a player. 22, I've got Jamal Musiala, who's certainly going to climb these ranks in coming years. Of course, scored the Bundesliga winning goal, didn't he? Big numbers again, 16 goals, 16 assists in all competitions. You know, kind of overlooked in terms of his quality as being the best youngster in world football, just because he's doing it so consistently for Bayern Munich. But again, doesn't break my top 20. Neither does Jude Bellingham, who, yes, is having a phenomenal season at Real Madrid. The best midfielder in the world right now, maybe. I'll let you argue that in the comments below. But this is done on the 2022-2023 season. And despite the fact he won the Bundesliga Player of the Year, 14 goals, I just felt that the injuries at the end of the season kind of held him back a little bit. He's a monster. There's no denying it. And he's going to be one of Real Madrid's best players for the next decade. But I've got him just outside the top 20 here. Let's get into the top 20. We'll reveal it one by one. 20th, I've got Luka Modric. Again, didn't put up the numbers that Jamal Musiala or Jude Bellingham did in terms of goals and assists, but that's not what you expect from Luka Modric. I still think behind Kevin De Bruyne and some of the other Manchester City players we're going to come on to, the best midfielder on the planet last season, he just, even at 37, is able to produce miraculous games of control. You think back to the performance at Anfield last season. Yes, he only won a Copa del Rey, but for me, despite the fact he's 37, Luka Modric still more influential on a majority of games than a Bellingham or a Musiala last season. And I'm sure I'll be getting some pelters in the comments for that, but, you know, it's personal preference. 19 and 18 I want to reveal together because, again, this is definitely going to cause some controversy in the comments below. I've gone for 19 Salah, 18 Saka. Now, obviously, people will be saying, well, Salah, all the goals, you know, 29 goals last season. Saka only put up 22 goals. But I just, personal preference, last season felt like Saka had more of an impact on a better team. I think Arsenal were, you know, comfortably a better side than Liverpool last year, and I think that was in no large part down to the fact that Bukayo Saka was so amazing. I think Liverpool took a significant step back, and Salah was kind of dragging them through games at times. But I just felt like Saka and Arsenal took such a stride forward, they overtook Liverpool in the Premier League's pecking order. And for me, that combined with winning England's Player of the Year, and how much enjoyment he gave me last season, I had to put Saka above him. 17, I've gone for Karim Benzema, 31 goals last season, but I could have had Benzema lower, I'm not going to lie. It's just 24 appearances in La Liga. He had injury problems consistently, he had injury problems at the World Cup, he's now in Saudi. I could have had Benzema lower, and now I'm kind of regretting not having him lower. But 31 goals, still very, very clutch. You think of the performances at the Nou Camp last year. Was it in the Copa del Rey semi-final? Pretty awesome. At 16, I've gone for Harold Kane. I do think he was maybe the third best striker on planet Earth, but I have got him below Lewandowski because he didn't win anything. And I do think to a level, trophies have to count for something. Admittedly, I think Kane is probably a better all-round player than Robert Lewandowski. 40 goals last season, 9 assists, but there was the penalty miss that knocked England out of the World Cup. Do you have to take that into account? Didn't win any silverware last season again with Tottenham Hotspur. I feel like you have to take that into account a little bit. He's a fabulous all-round player, so I've got Kane at 16. I wanted to get a defender in my 20 to 10, so I've put him in the middle. I've gone for Kim Min-jae at Napoli. 18 clean sheets last season, Serie A winner, maybe the second best centre-back on planet Earth. And I feel like because this award is so sloped towards strikers, wingers, attacking midfielders winning it, I wanted to give some recognition to defenders as well. So in the middle of the 20 to 10 bracket, I've put Kim. I think he was absolutely outstanding last year. 14, I've got Bobby Lewandowski. Like I said, I don't think he's as good of an all-round striker as Harry Kane anymore. 36 goals last season, though, can't be sniffed at. And the fact that he won La Liga, 30 goal involvements in 34 games, still incredibly impressive even at his age. I think Kane, for me, personal preference again, the better striker, but the achievement just tips it in Lever's favour. At 13, I've gone for Antoine Griezmann, who I think was La Liga's best player last year. I think he was absolutely amazing at the World Cup as well. I think it was 16 goals, 19 assists, wasn't it, last season, domestically and in Europe. Just a phenomenon back at Atletico now. And I know that he didn't win La Liga, or he didn't win Copa del Rey, he didn't win the Champions League, he didn't even win the World Cup. But I just think, again, sometimes you can't judge these things on purely achievements or stats. You just have got to watch them and put them where you feel they deserve to be based on ability. And I think Griezmann's ability last season was just awesome. He was so good to watch. So I've snuck him in at 13. Probably going to get some stick for that. At 12, I've gone for Julian Alvarez. Definitely one of the best strikers on the planet, and his achievements just bump him up, don't they? Pretty much won every trophy available to him last season. Obviously a treble winner, a World Cup winner, but he was also, I think, the 7th top scorer in the Premier League. He contributed goals, I think the 3rd top scorer at the World Cup as well. Just an all-round amazing footballer, works hard off the ball, won every bit of silverware available, never moans. You've got to have him in 12th, I think, just because of the amount of decoration he's got now already. 11th, I've gone for Kvaradona, of course, Serie A Player of the Year last year, 16 goals, 17 assists. I'm not sure he's going to be able to carry it on to that level this season, but let's see what happens. Without Spalletti there, can he continue to do it? But last season, to take Napoli to their first Scudetto since 1990, I think you've got to have at least 2 or 3 Napoli players in here. The achievement's just monstrous. It's monstrous. So I've got Kim, I've got Kvara, and obviously Osman still to come. At 10, I've got the player that I think is the most underrated footballer in the world, Bernardo Silva. Kind of slips between the cracks, doesn't he? When people are talking about the best creator or the best wide man, he kind of fits into so many different profiles that almost is held against him when it really shouldn't be. I mean, we saw him operate in the left back at times last season, not particularly successfully for Manchester City, but again, it was 10 goals, 8 assists last season, and a treble win. I just think, there's so many of that Man City team in my top 10. Bernardo Silva has to be in there, because if I was a manager, he would be one of the first names on the team sheet. The way he draws players in, the way he can dribble. He's just a monster, Bernardo Silva, and I think if they'd have lost him this summer, it would have been pretty disastrous for Manchester City. Definitely one of the best players in the treble-winning, all-conquering Man City side, so he breaches the top 10 for me. As you're going to see, there's a lot of Man City players in my top 10. At 9, I've gone for Ilkay Gundogan. Not as impressive in terms of raw numbers as some other midfielders on this list, but he is the most clutch midfielder in terms of goals and moments I can remember, maybe in Premier League history, or certainly in recent Premier League memory. Even you think to the FA Cup final where he scored 2 against Manchester United. You know, there were the games against Everton, there were the games against Leeds when he scored the brace. He just pops up with so many big moments. Effectively, that title battle between City and Arsenal hinged on moments from İlkay Gündoğan, really, at times. The fact he's gone to Barcelona now is a big loss for Manchester City. I don't think he's the most technically amazing midfielder on this list, but in terms of clutch moments, in terms of captaincy, leadership, silverware, goal scoring, İlkay Gündoğan has to be in the top 10. At 8, I've got another striker. I've gone for Victor Osimhen, who I think, you know, despite the fact 26 goals in Serie A doesn't seem on paper, you know, monstrous like a Haaland or an Mbappe, maybe even a Kane who got 30 in the Premier League, to win the Scudetto, score 5 and 6 in the Champions League, and score goals in the way he did and have impacts in the moments he had for Napoli last season, I think you have to have him extremely high. He is probably the most sought-after striker in the world, isn't he? You know, there were bids reportedly of £150 million this summer. He's going to do it again this season, I think. You know, he started like a rocket. I just think that Osimhen, behind the likes of Haaland and Mbappe, maybe Kane still, for me, I think is one of the best strikers in the world. And his numbers and his title last season kind of propel him to 8th in my thinking. Again, I wanted a defender in my top 10. I had a defender in my 20 to 10. I wanted a defender in my top 10. I've got Ruben Dias in there. And I know that not many other people have Ruben Dias in their top 10. But I think Stones is unlucky not to be in this top 30, by the way. Really, really unlucky. But I just think that Dias, as an out-and-out centre-back, I think Stones, now he's operating in the midfield role, is a better ball distributor, a better ball carrier. But as an out-and-out centre-back and as a leader, Ruben Dias is the guy. He's the best centre-back on the planet. You know, we interviewed William Saliba recently on Sky Sports for Saturday Social. He said the exact same thing. Treble winner, 43 appearances in all competitions. I wanted a defender from that Manchester City unit in my top 10. They won the treble, for God's sake. I think Dias has to go in. At 6, I've got Vinny Jr., who is coming off a season where he didn't necessarily have the silverware we've seen him win previously, you know, Champions Leagues, La Liga titles, just the Copa del Rey and the Club World Cup, which we're not really counting, are we, in terms of serious silverware, but big impacts. Yet again, 23 goals in all competitions. And for me, again, proving himself to be a legitimate Ballon d'Or competitor alongside an Mbappe and a Haaland next season. Yes, he didn't win the silverware or score the volume of goals to potentially propel him into that top 3, but I think we can all see the ability and talent. Like I've said already, I think the ability and talent for Vinicius is just so elite that he has to be in amongst this conversation for the top 5. Just misses out on my top 5, but no doubt over the next couple of years he'll be in that top 3 competing for this trophy. Let's get into the top 5 then. At 5, I've gone for Kevin De Bruyne. 31 assists last season, 10 goals in that all-conquering Manchester City side. Still the best creative midfielder on planet Earth. Has had injury problems that have just started to hold him back, but you know, still put up 10 Champions League appearances last season in that treble win. Still contributed massively domestically to their Premier League success. In the FA Cup final, still hugely influential. Like, I personally believe that Kevin De Bruyne is the best midfielder on the planet, but he's not the best midfielder in my Ballon d'Or list. That's because at number 4, I've gone for Rodri. Now, whilst KDB is the best all-round midfielder in world football for me, I think Rodri is no doubt the best defensive midfielder on the planet. I think no outfield player started more games for Manchester City last season than him, 52. He is the first name on the team sheet, I think even ahead of Erling Haaland, potentially. The first name on the team sheet for Pep Guardiola in terms of how he builds his side. Everything is built around Rodri. He's the best ball retainer in world football, has scored some massive crunch goals. So many, a bit like Gundogan, crunch clutch moments, Champions League final, for example, last season. And it's hard to quantify his ability because you don't want to just throw in tackles and interceptions, like passing range, pass completion, progressive passes, where he is a monster in all these metrics. But his leadership on the ball, his calmness on the ball is the personification of everything that's great about Manchester City. So for me, Rodri deserves to be in the top 5. And I just think last season, he's not as good of a footballer as Kevin De Bruyne, but last season, his influence on that Man City side was maybe a little bit stronger than Kevin De Bruyne. So I've just put him ahead of him. At 3, I've gone for Kylian Mbappe. I think it was 41 goals, 10 assists for PSG, 8 goals for France at the World Cup as well, the hat-trick in the World Cup final. Definitely the most scintillating player in world football to watch on his day. There's no doubt about that, but still, I just think playing for PSG, like, kind of, you lose 20%. Like, you got to retract 20%. He's amazing on the Champions League stage. Of course he is. On the World Cup stage, of course he is. Everybody knows his talent level is probably the best in the world. But I just think playing for PSG kind of pulls it back a little bit. Like, domestically, those goals don't have as much meaning as a La Liga goal or a Premier League goal. And that's so harsh, I know. But until he leaves PSG, yeah, I don't know how many Ballon d'Ors he can really win at PSG. Right, that leaves 1 and 2. It was a tough one, obviously. Lots of debate online between these two. But for me, the winner has to be Messi. I know that Haaland has put up the goals, freakish goal numbers, and goal numbers that he might well break again this season. 56 goals, Premier League Player of the Year, obviously Premier League Golden Boot, and a record breaker in a fashion I didn't think we would ever see. I never thought I'd see a 22-year-old arrive in the Prem and just dominate to that level where every record just looks like it was falling at the click of a fingers. Didn't even look like he was having to try that hard to break these records. So he is obviously a monster, a goal-scoring machine. But Messi, first World Cup in 36 years, the amount of goals he scored and the importance of those goals in the run-up to the final and in the final itself. Still put up, 16 goals, 16 assists in Liga. But like I said about Mbappe, those numbers kind of, for me, are a little bit meaningless. A little bit meaningless. That World Cup exploits, though, and the fact it is Messi. Like, his ability is still, and was still on show at the World Cup, is still at that level where you just can't imagine anyone ever being able to recreate it. Like, I can't imagine Messi 2.0 in 2040 that's just able to do these things. But for me, the World Cup success and the way he won the World Cup, that narrative has to play a part, has to be Lionel Messi, and it will be the final time he wins it. So, Haaland and Mbappe can go back and forth, and in the future, will win it. But Messi, while he's still here and while he's won a World Cup in the year that we're judging, you've just got to give it to him. All right, so that was my full 1 to 30 of the Ballon d'Or nominees. No doubt it's going to cause some controversy in the comments below, and I've probably had a couple of whiffs. So apologies if that is the case. If you want to let me know your 1 to 30, let me know in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. We'll see you later.